Welcome to the Disrupt Your Career podcast, brought to you by Claire Harbour
and Antoine Tirant. We're passionate about helping everyone find fulfillment in their work life.
We believe that big, messy, uncharted career changes are inevitable, and it's up to you to decide.
Will you take control and disrupt, or allow yourself to be disrupted?
We wrote the book about it, and now we share here our conversations with other thinkers in this crucial area.
Settle down and get ready to listen to this dose of wisdom.
On this episode of the Disrupt Your Career podcast, I'm delighted to welcome an old, but not so old in spirit, colleague of Antoine's, Riet Grond, who has had more than 20 years in geographically and functionally diverse roles in HR at Novartis, which is where he crossed paths with Antoine, preceded by a few years as a consultant across Europe at Accenture. He has an MBA from IE Business School, and he's just climbed a significant mountain. He's going to tell us more about that in a little while, but Riet, thank you so much for joining us.
I'm very pleased to join and contribute, and I look forward to it.
Very good. Then let's start, as we always do, with your career journey. You've been through one major pivot and numerous diverse challenges in your career, working directly with the biggest brains on client projects at Accenture, and you've also spanned so many aspects of HR in your long career at Novartis. Why don't you tell us how this extraordinary career has unfolded, and tell us whether it was more by design or serendipity, and perhaps you can highlight some of your moments of pride and of challenge.
I'll start by saying straight out, it's been, I would say, almost total serendipity. I got actually into Novartis by a misunderstanding. I added the wrong motivation letter to my application, which then attracted the hiring manager, and in I was. From there, it has always been very much focused on, as long as I can have an impact, make a difference, learn something new, and ideally work with great people, I'm in. And this has led to the fact that some roles were brought to my attention where my initial reaction was, why me? How come that I would be a good candidate for such a step? And actually, I've taken all those, been asked in the past also to reflect on some of the proud moments. Actually, I would say one of the proudest moments I've had has been a very personally touching experience. To sketch it quickly, I was called by a manager very early in my career into an office, and his team member was there. And they were having a debate about the topic. And I sided, but naturally, with the manager. And I took the position of the manager. I don't know why I did so and what triggered me to take that position. But I was very fortunate that afterwards that the associate came to me and said, I thought your role was to be neutral, to be objective, to basically balance points of view. And I almost had a physical reaction to that because I realized how much I let the person down, my function down, eventually myself down. It has been a very, very forming moment. Because from then onwards, for me, things like objectivity, being fair, focusing on facts has become so important and such a driving force. To some extent, I'm glad this experience happened. I don't wish anyone to be in that situation on the receiving end. We talked about it afterwards with this associate, and I've met him occasionally, and I've always reminded him how instrumental he has been for my career.
That's a beautiful thing, and I love the irony of the fact that you were being not remotely neutral in a Swiss company. Very hard-hitting in all kinds of respects. Now, I'm guessing that through this career in HR, you've worked alongside all kinds of amazing leaders, whether they have been your ultimate CEO-type leaders or peer leaders. And I'm wondering what the main lessons you would say you've picked up along the way would be thanks to these leaders.
To me, the common denominator of all the great leaders I've had the pleasure to work with, and I actually would say all of them were great leaders, is actually a very simple formula that I've adopted for myself. It's the two V's. It's values and it's value. Indeed, wherever I've been able to have meaningful conversations around any topic, looking through the lens of the value creation of a situation, of a proposal, of a topic, and the value of focusing on the right values. And if you're able to have conversations looking through those two lenses, good things will come, because you will be trying to maximize value for the organization, for the individual, whatever it is. And you're able to look at it through the lens of doing it the right way, through the values. And so to me, really the common denominator of working with all these great leaders comes down to this: values and value.
Spoken like a true former consultant as well. The idea of value creation comes straight out of some consulting textbooks. But yes, very powerful to remember those two V's together. Thank you. Let's talk a little bit about your transition from being a consultant in your early career to being a corporate HR guy. It's a pretty big move, and you did it relatively young. So tell us about the challenge that was involved in making that particular transition.
I've thoroughly enjoyed my career in consulting, although it was quite short. It was a few years, my early years in my professional career. And what I really enjoyed in the consulting world was the fast speed, the fact that you were on one project working with, let's say, the financial industry. Next thing you know is you are on a project in telecommunications. So this fast speed and these steep learning curves obviously are very inspiring. In particular, if you are young, you are discovering the professional world. It's very, very enriching, and kind of putting in the hours to get those learnings is not really seen as a sacrifice. Progressing through consulting, one of the things that I did indeed start missing more and more was the fact that I never really saw the consequences of all my wise words that I would have in consulting our clients. And more I was questioning, well, how do I know whether it is effective? And how do I know what the key learnings are if by the time that these things become relevant in a company, I'm already gone on a new assignment? And so I had a very clear trigger to move, which was really to move because I wanted to see more kind of the sustained impact I could have. Some of the challenges moving into corporate world is indeed, and I don't think it's unique to Novartis, that it's way more complex than what you might see being a consultant out there. And that at times then in particular contrasted on the speed element. If you're used to do things fast, which is really fast-paced consulting environment, and you then come into a corporate environment that is also fast, but it involves many more stakeholders, you do feel that you're slowed down and you're questioning to some extent the value of that. Obviously, 2 decades later, I see a lot of value in doing things the way we do it. But that was a contrast that to me was a hurdle to overcome. Eventually I did, but it took some time.
Required a lot of patience, I'm sure.
Absolutely.
You've developed in oodles since then, no doubt. Now let's talk about a group of professionals who don't tend to be that patient, and that's early career professionals. If you think about the learning that you've had and your experience across consulting and global corporations, what advice do you have for those who are looking to start their careers?
10 years ago, I would probably have a very different advice than today. One, because I think I've had a few lessons since, but I also think because the world has changed since quite dramatically. And I think what we do have is a little bit this notion of wanting to have a bit of a path that we can follow, that we would like to basically go through different steps, because we assume certain learnings coming with these steps. And I think more than ever, by having such a path, we create a very narrow world of opportunities to follow. We may be biased on experiences where we know what we get in terms of learning, but we may miss out on opportunities that might give us disproportionate impact, disproportionate learning, because there are opportunities out there that didn't exist in the past. So to me, it would be to stay curious for different experiences that might give you the learnings that you're after, and consider that the world has changed quite dramatically, and some non-obvious experiences might actually give you a disproportionate learning impact, and therefore allow you to be better prepared for the next steps than you might have thought, just because you may have been somewhat narrow in the way you look at the world, or have followed the path that many others have followed before.
Beautiful. So eschewing the well-trodden paths, the recommendations, and looking just a little bit further around the corner. Let's look at mountaineering. You've got a passion for mountaineering. You use your passion for it as a school for life and for leadership. And you've just come back only recently from a sabbatical that you took to climb a particularly big peak. Talk us through your motivation here, and what lessons do the mountains teach us?
So to me, there is a lot of parallels in mountaineering with School of Life or with School of Leadership. And I'm really in awe with mountain guides, because I really do believe they're true natural leaders. They have a sense of responsibility. They have a task at hand. They need you to bring, or they want you to bring to a mountain to your highest performance possible. But they need to consider the conditions. They need to consider your condition. Are you able to do so? How much stretch is healthy? How much stretch is too much? When does it get risky? If they consider as they consider the external conditions, they need to decide when is the time to also return if it's not appropriate to go forward. And these are all elements, right? If you look at the leader, they have a vision, they have a goal, they need to convey this goal, they need to create a bond with their team members to be able to together go there. But they need to also be able to listen to the signals external from the guest, in this case from me, to understand, is it possible, is it not, and make decisions in the moment in this broader context of achieving the goal. But then also being able to say, enough is enough. We're taking too much risk. We need to change the plan. We need to pause. All these elements I find quite fascinating. And in particular, if you're climbing in the Alps, some of these elements are so unpredictable. And that's what I like as an analogy to today's world, right? A lot of things are no longer predictable. And you just need to be able to listen to the external environment, to listen to yourself, and be able to say, I can still responsibly move ahead, or now is enough. Let's call it. Let's turn. Let's reconsider, or let's reconvene. So all of that to me is really very, very relevant for what I'm doing here in my role, in my career, and where mountaineering has taught me in a very pleasant, very intense and rich way.
Fantastic. There's nothing like real life learning of whatever kind. And it sounds as though you've made excellent use of it. You made a specific link between mountaineering and psychological safety. We hear a lot about psychological safety these days. Can you paint the picture of what you really mean?
I'd say if you are together with your guide and you have a peak in mind, you have planned for the peak, I find it very important that from the guide, you don't get the sense of, we better get there and we better achieve, but that the guide is able to create an environment where you, as the mountaineer, are able at any point in time to be vulnerable and to tell him or her, I don't feel good today. I'm not sure that I'm at my best today. I'm scared, never done this before, particular technical stretch, and not creating that feeling that Now we've invested time to get here. It's also time and money. Now I better kind of tough it through. And all those things become so important in terms of being able to say, you know what, I just don't feel it today. And it's okay. And if you have a guide who creates exactly that environment and puts you in that position that you feel safe to at any point in time say and do what you believe is right, then it's just fantastic. And it's just a great feeling. And that is something that obviously using somewhat different levers, but as leaders, I think we're here for. Right? We should be the ones who create that environment where everyone can be him or herself and doesn't feel like having to overcome a hurdle to be able to say what they feel, do what they feel, and just express themselves accordingly.
Fantastic. And of course, the guide or the leader in the metaphor should, of course, be expecting to receive that around him or her too. And we could create an ecosystem of safe mountain guides. That sounds Absolutely. Like a wonderful way to be working.
Yeah, and if you look at just very quickly, the probably the most famous mountaineer, right? There is Reinhold Messner. He always says, I have way more often turned around than achieved a peak. Probably that's why he's still alive, and that's why he was so successful eventually in making it happen. But to me, those are important lessons in life, not to tough things through just for the sake of toughing it through. You need to be purpose-driven, but you also need to pick up the signs around and be able to express those.
Indeed, that's a wonderful illustration. Let's talk about a slightly different aspect of life. Let's talk about returning to work after time spent parenting. You recently posted something quite publicly about the challenges of doing this, and it's a pretty universal question and one that's often not handled particularly well. What are your ideas, and how can HR leaders, as every other type of leader, do better?
This is more of a framing question or a framing challenge. I think as long as we look at the time spent outside, let's say work or corporate work, as time not working or time not valued by an organization, then of course you talk about a break, right? But if you look at it as yet another of these invaluable experiences where you learn things, you just need to kind of be conscious of what you learn. A lot of these learnings can become quite instrumental in adding to your backpack of learning experiences and therefore making you actually potentially even better prepared for a next forward role than without that perceived break. And so to me, it's how do we help anyone who goes out on a parental leave to really look at it as filling their rucksack of relevant experiences as opposed to missing time to contribute to these learning experiences. And that was nice to have these discussions. And of course, then the follow-up question is, well, I might as well look at it that way, but how do we help the organizations look at it that way? This does go back a bit to the point around, as long as you have pretty clearly defined career paths that you're supposed to follow to achieve a certain goal, either perceived or formally institutionalized. Of course, some of these bit more off the beaten path experiences might not factor in. But if as an organization, you look first and foremost for learning experiences that you filled in your backpack that can become relevant for a next step, then an experience outside of work can be a very, very relevant experience. I think it's just very important that you as the individual who takes that maternity leave, for instance, are very conscious about what you want to learn and what you are going to learn through the perceived break and are able to articulate those learnings very clearly. Then I think you will find company and individual will find themselves because you're talking a common language, a language around learning experiences and not about career paths.
That's wonderful. It sounds like very enlightened people management. And I'm betting that in many organizations, that stage of thinking and framing hasn't been reached. which still leaves some power in the hands of the individual, but more onus on them to push that communication of the value of the break or the different learning context. Obviously, therefore, you're in an organization that has and permits and encourages enlightened people management. What about other organizations? When you look around you in your ecosystem of other people leaders, what would you either observe as being great examples of companies or individual doing particularly well, or indeed other companies in general that are making great strides in the management of people?
I think what we generally observe is indeed that the success formulas from the past may not necessarily be the success formulas for the future because of the change of context, be it how quickly the world around us is changing, be it also how the different generations, right, look at work very differently. So I think there's a broad acknowledgement that some of the success formula needs to be reconsidered. And then I think, as it is human nature, for some this is enriching, and this is definitely something that they want to push. For others, they might be more on the fence. They're cautiously curious. And there might be others who may need a bit more help to reconsider some of the former success formula and question some of the behaviors for the future. And I think this is pretty universal in the multinational organizations. You will always have these different pockets. You will have those who are a bit more avant-garde, who are pushing. You might have some who bring back more the current reality sense. But overall, I think we are taking steps in that direction. And I think here, the speed in terms of how quickly we move in that direction will, I think, depend to some extent from the dynamics, right? And one dynamic is, are we more in a talent market versus not? Some of these things become more urgent, if you don't really have a choice, right? Because you're no longer able to attract people you want to attract because they don't identify with what you're able to offer. I could point, and I would want to point to some specific organizations where I feel like they've nailed this, but there are definitely some out there who are more public about trying to go in this direction and their aspiration and maybe also their early successes. You will have to accept that there are some who are a bit more progressive than others within any given organization, and that it might always take a bit of time to get.
For sure. Riet, I am fascinated to know, we're coming towards the end of the year. What are the most exciting things that you're going to be up to in 2024?
2024 for us as an organization is going to be a very important year. We've had 2 years where we have set up the organization differently, and it has taken a bit of time to get there. But we're very, very excited about where we are right now. So we've basically done the prep work to now really kind of go to the next level and execute on this strategy with the new organizational design. And so one of the questions really is what we had in mind when we were designing the new organization, and I'm now talking the organization overall, but also our function and my team. To what extent is it really getting traction? To what extent is it really creating that impact that we were eager to create? And I think where I'm very excited is, and this goes back a bit to the discussion we had around consulting before, if we learn certain things on the way, how agile are we to then really say, here we have a positive proof of concept, full steam ahead. Here we might be on the way to a positive proof of concept. We need a bit more data. But then also where we clearly have a negative proof of concept, how do we as a team, as an organization, kind of accept that and accept that if we want to drive innovation, we should want to have also that third bucket, right? Where not everything works out, because it's an indication that we've dared something new, something different, something off the beaten path. And then basically just draw the conclusions, take the insights, and decide then in the relevant platforms and dialogues what we do with that. And that to me is exciting. If you can embrace change and transformation through the lens of learning, becoming a learning organization, and having the culture to review, and in the review, really being able to be yourself, to be objective, to be unbiased. And that learning carries the organization forward because you do have a learning organization culture. Then that's quite exciting. And I think 2024 will be a big year for exactly that.
Wonderful. I look forward to hearing more on that exciting front. And I know that our listeners will have been very much inspired by your mountaineering metaphor and the vision of how the guide works like a CEO or a leader. It's been fascinating talking to you, and I'm very grateful to you for having come to spend the time with us today.
Thank you so much, Claire. Same for me.
We hope you enjoyed hearing from this month's guest as much as we did.
Do go and check out our work on disrupt-your-career.com and come back soon. Thank you.